All right, so are you ready for this? We're gonna like really dive deep into some pretty interesting stuff, Like we've got our hands on something pretty cool. The BSW party, you know them. Well, they've got this draft of their election platform for the 2025 German election. It's like, think of it as a sneak peek, right? I mean, this is the draft that their leaders approved, like back on January 2nd, but the real deal, the finalized version, that's coming out at their big convention in just a couple days.
Yeah, and what's really kind of fascinating is that the BSW, well, they're making some pretty big claims, right?
Yeah.
They're basically saying that Germany is like going downhill,
Yeah.
And get this, they're saying that they're the only ones who can actually fix it.
Mm.
I mean, talk about a dramatic entrance, right?
Yeah, it definitely gets your attention, right? It's not just like they're saying, oh, we'll just tweak a few things here and there. No, they're saying the whole system, the whole thing. It needs a serious makeover. So let's like break it all down. Yeah. Let's see what they're actually proposing. Where's the beef, right?
Well, they don't hold back, that's for sure. They start off by painting this like really bleak picture of Germany. They're talking about a stagnant economy, industries just packing up and leaving. The anxieties all over society, and even like the threat of war looming around the corner.
Yeah.
They're putting all the blame on, well, both the current government and the leadership from the past 16 years.
It's like they're saying, hey, everyone, look around. Everyone else has messed things up. And we're like, the only ones who have a clue, right? Yeah. And they're really playing up this whole image of themselves as the only voice of reason,
Yeah.
Like the only true peace party.
Yeah, and you can see why that kind of message, it would resonate, right? Especially with all the uncertainty in the world right now. I mean, think about it. High energy prices, teacher shortages, people worrying about what will happen when they retire, all that stuff. That keeps a lot of people up at night,
Totally, totally. So the BSW, they're tapping into that, all those anxieties. But the real question is, do their solutions actually match up? Do they really solve those problems? So let's dig into the first part of their platform, the part they call deindustrialization, stop a comeback for the German economy. So clearly they're putting the economy front and center, right?
Absolutely. And when it comes to energy and climate, they jump right in, criticizing the current policies. They're saying that this big push for renewables, well, is backfired. It's led to energy that's expensive and unreliable, And they're pointing fingers at the sanctions against Russia, saying those have hurt Germany more than helped.
Yeah, and they even go so far as to say that this whole like 100% climate neutrality thing, it's actually blocking innovation. Like it's stifling new technologies that could give us a more balanced approach, right? So it sounds like they're going for a more, I don't know, maybe a more controversial approach, right? A bit more pragmatic, maybe.
It's definitely a different direction than what we're hearing from other parties. For example, one really concrete thing they want to do is get rid of the ban on combustion engine cars.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. I mean, that is a huge EG change from all this focus on electric vehicles, right?
That would be a massive shift. It makes you wonder, like, do they actually have a plan to deal with the environmental impact?
Yeah, and that's not all. They also want to scrap that, that controversial heating law, the one that's causing so many problems for homeowners.
Right, right.
And then maybe the most radical thing they're suggesting is to, get this, nationalize energy grids. I mean, that would totally change how energy works in Germany, wouldn't it?
Whoa, that's a big one. They're definitely not afraid to shake things up. But, criticizing is one thing. What about their solutions? What are they actually going to do? So in the next section, innovation in industry, they lay out their vision.
Yeah, one of the big takeaways here is they're calling for a much bigger role for the state, the government, in supporting key industries. Like they want to boost investment in research and development, like a lot. They're aiming for 4% of GDP. And they're even talking about a state-backed industrial fund to help not just startups, but also those important existing industries, the backbone,
It's like they're, I don't know, looking back at a time when the government was more hands-on with the economy, right? It's a very different approach from that, let the free market decide idea.
Right. And there's some really interesting parts to their approach. Like they actually praise the role of the state in past innovations. They're saying it wasn't just private companies driving progress. Yeah. The government played a big role too.
It's an interesting take, isn't it? Like they're challenging that story that we always hear about government just getting in the way. But here's something that really caught my eye. They're talking about transforming large companies into foundations. Why would they do that?
Well, think about it. Foundations, their whole purpose is to focus on the long term. Right. Sustainability, broader impact on society. So the BSW, they're saying that by turning these big companies into foundations, you shift the focus away from those like quick profits and shareholder payouts,
Yeah.
and instead you're encouraging long-term thinking. And they even want to create a whole new legal structure for businesses, a Gesellschaft mit gebundenem Vermögen. It's
Okay, you lost me there. What does that even mean?
it basically translates to company with bound assets. It's a new way of structuring companies where they'd be legally required to reinvest their profits back into the business or use them to benefit the community.
So they're literally trying to rewire how big businesses work, the whole incentive structure. That's a bold move for sure. Makes you wonder if it's even
It
possible.
would be a huge EE change, definitely. But it shows how committed they are to this idea of like a secure, stable economy where both businesses and workers feel safe in the long term.
Okay, so we've seen their plan for the economy, but what about, social policies? They have this whole section about a just performance society.
Hmm.
Sounds like they think Germany's lost its way when it comes to fairness.
Yeah, that's exactly their argument. They see this widening gap between rich and poor, and they think the system is rigged to benefit the wealthy, at the expense of the working class.
So they're proposing some pretty big changes. Like they want to raise the minimum wage right away for to 15 euro. That's a big jump.
Wow, that's a big change. Do you think a higher minimum wage would really reduce poverty? Or could it, I don't know, backfire and lead to people losing jobs?
That's the big question, right? Economists have been arguing about that for years. The BSW, they acknowledge there are risks, but they say the benefits of a higher minimum wage outweigh those risks. It's definitely a complex issue with strong arguments on both sides.
And then there's their plan to, like, get rid of mini and midi jobs. Those are so common, especially in some sectors. Wouldn't that cause a lot of disruption? Yeah, it would be a big change for sure. And it's one of those areas where the BSW needs to give us more details, like how would they manage that transition?
Now, when it comes to Social Security and welfare, they want to completely change things. They want to replace that, Bürgergeld system with a more generous unemployment insurance thing. And they're also suggesting a minimum pension of 1,500 euro after 40 years of contributions.
And this is where they get really specific. They want to restructure the whole pension system based on the Austrian model.
Hold on, what's so special about the Austrian model? What's the difference?
Well, the Austrian model, it's known for like this emphasis on social partnership. That means that employers, employees, and the government, they all work together to manage the pension system. Yeah. It also tends to be more generous, the benefits, and it has a stronger focus on like solidarity. So everyone contributes, even the high earners.
Oh, okay. So basically the BSW is saying the German system is failing and they have a better way. And they're really driving that point home with some specific things. Like they want everyone, even politicians, to pay into the state pension system.
That's a pretty bold statement. It's like they're saying, hey, we're all in this together, no free rides.
And let's not forget about that 120 increase in pensions. That would be a big help for retirees who are struggling.
For sure. They're really trying to show us a system that's more generous, more inclusive, and less risky than what we have now.
So their whole economic vision is about security, stability, and a stronger safety net for everyone. But whether it's actually doable and if it would actually work, that's a whole other conversation, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's one thing to have a vision, it's another to actually make it happen. And that's what voters have to think about, right?
Yeah.
How does the BSW platform compare to other parties?
Okay, so we've covered their economic vision, but we're just getting started. There's so much more to talk about, like education, healthcare, even their positions on those, hot button issues like migration and foreign policy. We're going to dig into all of that in part 2 of our deep dive. So stick with us. It's going to get even more interesting.
All right, so we're back, ready to keep digging into this BSW platform. Last time we tackled their economic vision, but they don't stop there, right? There's like a whole bunch of stuff about education, healthcare, even how we interact with technology, all that.
Yeah, no shortage of ideas, that's for sure. They really dive into all the big challenges Germany's facing. And for each one, they say, hey, we've got a better way.
Okay, so let's talk education.
Okay.
They're calling for a top education system, but their approach, it's kind of different, isn't it? They want like nationwide standardized tests and a curriculum for everyone, right? With a big focus on the basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, all that. Yeah, it's like they're pushing back against all that emphasis on, abstract thinking concepts, not enough practical stuff. They're saying, let's get back to the core stuff. Make sure every student has a strong foundation.
And I bet that appeals to like parents who are worried about their kids. Are they really prepared for the future? But wouldn't a nationwide curriculum, wouldn't that take away some of the flexibility? The innovation that individual schools and teachers that they bring, how do you balance that?
That's a good point. It would be interesting to hear how the BFW would handle that. But here's where things get interesting and maybe a little controversial. They want elementary schools to be tech-free.
Wait, seriously? Like, no phones, no tablets in the classroom? Isn't that a bit much?
Yeah.
Kids these days, they grow up with tech everywhere. Don't they need to learn how to use it?
Yeah, well, the BSW says that all that tech, it's a huge distraction, especially for the little kids. They think by having tech-free spaces in elementary schools, it'll help kids focus, on those fundamental skills, build good learning habits. It's definitely a bold move, and I'm sure people will debate it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Is it going too far, or is it like a necessary correction? Definitely something to think about. But let's switch gears, talk about healthcare, because the BSW has some big ideas there too. They're calling for what is it, a Bürgerversicherung, right? A
Yeah.
universal healthcare system with the same benefits for everyone.
Yeah, a total overhaul of that two-tier system we have now, where if
Mhm.
you have private insurance, you usually get better care.
Yep.
The BSW says healthcare is a basic right. Everyone should have access to the same quality of care, no matter how much money they make.
That sounds great, but how would they actually pay for that? Wouldn't that mean higher taxes? Or maybe longer wait times for everyone?
Those are the practical questions, right? The BSW would have to show us a detailed plan, how they make the switch and make sure it's sustainable. But their goal is clear, a more fair healthcare system where everyone gets treated the same.
And they're not stopping there. They want stricter rules on drug prices, they want to stop hospitals from closing, and they want to halt privatization. They even want full coverage for dental and eyeglasses.
Yeah, they're definitely tapping into people's fears about healthcare getting more and more expensive, the feeling that the system just isn't working for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that, right? Finding a good doctor, especially a specialist, it can feel impossible sometimes. And the costs, it's crazy. So the BSW is promising a solution, but is it realistic?
Exactly. They're painting this picture of healthcare that's easier to access, more affordable, more focused on what patients need. But, like they say, the devil's in the details.
Okay, let's move on to another tough issue, housing. The BSW, they want to strengthen nonprofit housing, and they want to bring in rent controls across the country to fight those crazy rent increases.
So they're basically saying the free market hasn't delivered affordable housing. The government needs to step in, take more control. Pretty big challenge to how things work now.
But is it even possible to freeze rents across the whole country? Wouldn't that mean less new construction? And wouldn't we end up with even worse housing shortages down the line? What about landlords, Wouldn't they get hurt if they can't raise rents to keep up with inflation and repairs and all that?
Those are all valid points, and I'd want to know how the BSW would address those.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be controversial, especially for people who think the free market is the best way to handle housing.
Seems like they're willing to fight those powerful interests, go for a more hands-on approach. Speaking of challenging the status quo, the BSW also has some interesting ideas about transportation. They're not totally anti-car, but they definitely want to move away from what they call it, car hostility, and they want to support a wider range of options for getting around.
Yeah, they seem to get the cars are still important for a lot of people, especially in rural areas, but they want to encourage more sustainable, efficient ways to travel.
And they're suggesting this people's leasing program for eco-friendly cars, including fuel-efficient combustion engines. Sounds like a compromise, trying to bridge the gap between being green and, real life.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. Shows they're trying to find solutions that work for everyone, not just people who can afford the latest electric cars.
Okay, so we've covered education, healthcare, housing, transportation. We're starting to see their priorities for Germany, right? But what about their stance on the world stage? Remember, they call themselves the only bee peace party. Does their foreign policy actually match that?
One of the most striking things about their foreign policy is how much they emphasize peace. Like they're totally against military intervention, arms exports, all that. They want diplomacy, de-escalation. That's their priority.
Sounds idealistic, but how does that actually work in practice? What are they proposing?
Well, for example, they want to completely stop all German funding for the war in Ukraine. And they're pushing for immediate negotiations. They even oppose having U.S. missiles stationed in Germany.
Wow, okay, that's pretty controversial. It's a very different foreign policy than what other parties are talking about. It's like they're not just questioning certain policies, they're questioning Germany's whole role in NATO, our relationship with the U.S., all of it.
Yeah, there's skepticism about NATO. It's not just about specific policies. It's a fundamental belief that Europe needs to be more independent, find its own way in the world. They want more autonomy. Less reliance on the U.S. is a big shift in how they see things.
So they're peace-loving, but fiercely independent. That's a bold stance. Now let's talk digital rights. The BSW has some strong opinions about technology and how it affects us. They're all about creating a citizen-friendly digital world, but what does that even mean?
Well, they want strong protection against, you know, data collection surveillance, not just by governments, but by companies too. They're really worried about those big tech companies. You know, the power they have over our data. They're saying we need to take back our privacy, stop those companies from using our data to make money.
Yeah, it does feel like we're losing control of our data every day. But here's something I found interesting. They're talking about a right to non-digital participation. What does that even mean?
It's an interesting idea. They're saying that not everyone wants to be online all the time, constantly connected, tracked. They think you should have the right to opt out of that whole digital world, to live offline without being penalized for it.
So, like, you wouldn't be forced to use online banking or government websites or social media if you didn't want to. That's pretty radical, right?
It is. And here's another one that might surprise you.
Yeah.
They want to make it a law that government agencies have to accept cash.
Wow, so they're not just going after corporations, they're trying to make sure people have choices when they deal with the government, too. It's about protecting individual freedom, in this digital age.
Exactly. They think keeping cash is essential for privacy and for being financially independent. They're worried about a future where everything's digital, where every transaction is tracked. And if you don't want to be part of that, you're left out.
It's definitely something to think about. I bet some of our listeners, they feel overwhelmed by the digital world. This would resonate with them.
Okay, we've talked peace, digital rights. Now for something that's always going to spark debate, migration. The BSW's position here is pretty different from what other parties are saying.
They're calling for a complete stop to what they call uncontrolled immigration. And they want to pause, no new arrivals for now. They say Germany needs to take back control of its borders, make sure immigration benefits the German people. That's strong language for sure. They're challenging that whole idea that Germany should be like a safe haven for everyone. And they want stricter rules for asylum seekers, and they want to focus on deporting people who commit crimes or are here illegally. They even reject that UN Global Compact for migration.
It's a tough stance, no doubt. And it raises some big questions like, how does this fit with Germany's international obligations, our commitment to human rights? Would it even be moral, even if it was possible?
Yeah, those are questions voters need to grapple with. It's clear the BSW is appealing to people who think immigration is out of control, that it's threatening Germany's identity. But I think there will be a lot of pushback from people who want a more open, inclusive society.
It's complicated with no easy answers, and it's probably going to be one of the biggest topics in the election.
Okay, so migration, that's a really emotional issue. And then there's another one that's still on people's minds. COVID-19 and how the government handled it. The BSW clearly sees this as a weak spot, and they're using that anger, that distrust a lot of people still feel.
They want a full investigation, like a parliamentary inquiry, into everything the government did during the pandemic. They want to know what worked, what didn't, who messed up, and they want compensation for people who are hurt by lockdowns, mandates, vaccine side effects, all that.
It's a direct appeal to people who felt like they were ignored, silenced, even punished during the pandemic. Like they're saying, we hear you, we see you, and we're going to hold those in power accountable.
And it's not just about the past. They want to reform those public health institutions, make sure they're independent, transparent. They're saying the system failed and it can't happen again. They're even suggesting something pretty radical, a corona amnesty.
Wait, what? A corona amnesty? What would that even mean?
Basically, it would be like a pardon for anyone who broke those COVID rules, like going to a party, not wearing a mask, refusing the vaccine, all that. It's definitely controversial, but it shows how much this issue still matters to people.
Yeah, there's no doubt the pandemic left a lot of scars, physical and emotional. The BSW is tapping into all that resentment, and they're promising justice. Will voters buy it? We'll see.
It's a bold move, that's for sure. And it shows they're willing to push the limits, challenge the conventional wisdom. It fits with their whole strategy of being the outsiders, the ones who aren't afraid to say what others won't.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Their vision for just performance society, their calls for a top education system, a citizen-friendly digital world. We've looked at their controversial stances on migration, their demands for a re-examination of the pandemic. But there's one more piece we need to look at. Their vision for a comeback for the German people. It's almost like their mission statement, their big picture for Germany.
Yeah, it's like the combination of all their ideas, the future they're trying to create.
Okay, so let's dive into that in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this BSW platform. We've gone through a lot, their ideas about the economy, society, those hot button issues, even their digital vision, all that.
It's been quite a ride.
Right. But now we got to zoom out, look at the big picture, the whole story they're telling with this platform. They call it a comeback for the German people. And it's kind of like the culmination of all their ideas, right?
Wow.
Their grand vision for Germany.
Yeah, and that phrase, comeback, it's powerful, right? It suggests that Germany, we've lost something, we've been knocked down, and we need to fight to get back on top.
Yeah, like it plays into that feeling they've been talking about, the decline, the anxiety, all
Yeah,
that.
exactly. It resonates with how a lot of people feel, like something's not right, Germany's lost its way, and the BSW is saying, hey, we're the solution. We can bring back the good old days.
Okay, so let's break it down. What do they actually mean by a comeback for the German people? What are the specifics? Well, they start by talking about a strong economy, of course.
Yeah.
Like that's the foundation for everything else, right?
Yeah.
Social welfare, security, even, a vibrant culture. They're saying if you want to fix Germany's problems, you got to fix the economy first.
Makes sense. A strong economy means jobs, wealth, that feeling of security, hope for the future. But they're not just talking about growth for growth's sake, are they?
No, definitely not.
Hmm.
They're really stressing fairness, opportunity for everyone. They want an economy that works for everyone, not just the rich.
Yeah.
Fair wages, secure pensions, affordable housing. It all ties back to that just performance society idea.
Right. So it's about a more equal society where everyone has a chance to make it. But it's not just about material stuff, right? They talk about education and healthcare too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are basic rights, they say. Essential for people to live fulfilling lives and for society to move forward. They argue that the current system isn't delivering on those promises.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're proposing all kinds of changes to make those systems, education and healthcare, more fair and effective.
Okay. Strong and fair economy, access to education and healthcare. What else is part of this comeback?
Well, they put a big emphasis on security,
Hmm.
both at home and, in the world. They say people need to feel safe in their communities, confident that the government can protect them from threats, both internal and external.
Which brings us back to what they were saying before about, strengthening the police, securing the borders, and being more careful about foreign policy. It seems like they're tapping into this deep desire for order, stability.
Absolutely. It's about that unease people feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
About crime, terrorism, all the instability in the world. They're offering this vision of a Germany that's strong, secure, in control.
And it's interesting how they tie security to freedom. They're saying you can't have one without the other, and that both have been eroding lately.
They're really critical of what they see as this growing culture of censorship conformity.
Right.
They say it shuts down debate, limits what people can say, and it undermines democracy.
Yeah.
For them, a truly strong, secure society is one that embraces freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom to act.
So it's not just about building walls and, having a big military. It's about creating a society that's strong and free, where people feel safe and empowered to live how they want.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
between the need for security and the need for freedom.
Okay, so their vision for a comeback, it's about a strong economy, social fairness, security, and freedom. Anything else?
One more thing. They finish this section by talking about national identity and a cohesive culture. They say that a shared sense of belonging is essential for a healthy society. It creates unity, a sense of purpose.
Which is interesting because they don't actually say what that identity asks, right?
But-
They leave it kind of open to interpretation.
Yeah, I think they're trying to appeal to a wide range of voters, people who might have different ideas about what it means to be German. But they're definitely saying that there's something special about German culture, about our history, a shared heritage that needs to be protected and, celebrated.
Yeah, like they're saying we need to remember who we are, where we came from, what makes us unique. And they link that back to their point about education, right?
Yes.
Having a strong system that teaches those values to young people.
Exactly. They're saying education isn't just about facts and skills.
Yeah.
It's about shaping citizens,
Yeah.
passing on that torch, of German culture and identity.
Okay, so we've unpacked their whole vision for this comeback for the German people. It's big, it's ambitious, touches on pretty much everything, right? But now that we're at the end of our deep dive, let's take a step back. What does this platform tell us about the BSW? What's their game plan for the election?
Well, one thing's for sure. They're not afraid to make waves. They're taking some strong stances, offering a clear alternative to how things are now. They're not trying to please everyone. They're going after a specific group of voters, people who are fed up with the current situation.
Yeah, they're not playing it safe. They're tackling those controversial issues, using language that gets people talking, gets a reaction. They're betting that this will make them stand out, energize their base.
It's risky, for sure.
Yeah.
High risk, high reward. If it works, they could see a lot of support from voters who are desperate for change. But if it backfires, they could alienate moderates, end up even more on the fringes.
So it's a gamble, but a calculated one. And it could work if they can tap into that dissatisfaction, that's bubbling under the surface in Germany. They're speaking to those fears about the economy, security, the future, and they're offering a clear vision, a different way forward.
And whether they win or lose, they're changing things up. They're forcing other parties to respond to their ideas. And they're pushing the limits of what's acceptable in politics these days.
They're shaking things up, making people think, forcing a conversation about where Germany's headed. That's valuable in itself, even if they don't get elected.
Absolutely. They're questioning the assumptions, the that's just how it is mentality. They're saying, hey, let's imagine a different Germany, a better Germany, and let's fight for it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the takeaway for our listeners?
The BSW platform, it's a challenge, it's provocative, and it's an invitation to join the debate about Germany's future. It reminds us that democracy, it's a process, not an endpoint. It's up to all of us to participate, to stay informed, and make our voices heard.
Exactly. Don't just accept how things are. Don't be afraid to ask tough questions, to demand better. Do your research, check out what different parties are saying, and decide what kind of future you want for Germany. And then go out there and make it happen. That's what democracy is all about.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay informed. The future of Germany, it's in your hands.